Joe Rogan. Why'd you take your pants off? Derek Lewis. Because my balls was hot. Best interview ever.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, a week and a half away from the start of the NBA season. So we're getting ourselves ready for the last of the fantasy drafts coming up, many happening this week, this weekend, before things kick off next week. So what I'm going to be doing this week is looking at the positions: point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. And of course, there's always overlap between those positions, but just touching on some news specifically for guys who play those positions, and I'm going to make that designation myself. Not that it matters. We'll just talk about some of the interesting things that have happened over the past couple of weeks, changes in value, things to pay attention to with these certain positions, and then some season award predictions as well. So you'll have half a show on news. Today we're going to be looking at point guards, and then I'm going to be looking also at the at my playoff predictions for this season. We'll do all-star predictions, award predictions through the week also, and then we get ready for the NBA season next week. Michael Bolton, he's already ready.
Let's get to it.
Really strong idea there, Michael Bolton. Let's start by going through some of this news regarding point guards, and we have to start with, I guess, the biggest news at the moment, and that is DeJounte Murray of the San Antonio Spurs. He did leave today's preseason game with a knee injury. He was able to walk off the court. I believe they did bring a wheelchair out for him, but he walked off the court, and he is going to be having an MRI on that knee. Now, it didn't look good. It looked sort of reminiscent of the Jabari Parker ACL injury, and of course, we hope that's not the case. But it wasn't great. Parker was also able to walk off the court after his ACL. I think Zach LaVine may have been as well when he did his. So just because he walked off, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is a good sign. And the way that his knee buckled did not look positive at all. Now, we don't know that this is going to be what's happening with DeJounte, but it's a bitter blow for a guy who'd been putting up some pretty strong numbers in the preseason before today and was looking like a real riser. His offense was starting to come around a little bit, but he was still providing that value with strong rebounding, good defensive numbers, and if anything came along with that offense or his ability to put up some assists, then the value would have really been kicking on. I think he averaged 7 assists per game before today's game in under 20 minutes a game. The field goal percentage was pretty good. Yeah, the threes are still going to be lacking, but it is a worry here with DeJounte, and until we find out more news, it is going to be hard to draft him in that 60 to 70 type range where he was going, or where he should have been going in a lot of drafts. I think that we could see Patty Mills step into that starting role. But Derek White's the guy to have a look at. So if he is on your waiver wire, he's got significantly higher upside than Mills, in my opinion. Mills is fine, he can hit threes, but White can do a lot of other things. He can rebound, he gets more assists, he can get steals. So he'd be the guy. I wouldn't be dropping Murray just yet, but if White is available on the waiver wire, he is the guy that I'd be looking at in this scenario, just to see what happens. Because if Murray is out, and again, if I had to go either way, I do think that we're going to be seeing multiple months here for DeJounte. I hope it's not the case, and this is me being complete armchair doctor, but I've seen that injury happen a number of times where I don't look at it and go, oh, it's going to be fine. There is a definite amount of worry. He is having an MRI on it tomorrow, so we'll hear more information on that then. But it's not a great looking situation for DeJounte Murray at this point in terms of how that knee injury is looking, unfortunately for him. Today's show is brought to you by Vivid Seats. Make sure you guys do check out Vivid Seats, because if you want to have a great night out, whether that is a sporting event, a concert, a show, whatever it is, Vivid Seats will help you get there. With Vivid Seats, you can attend that concert or show or sporting event of your choice at a great price. It is the best place that you can go online to find tickets. You can sort by the price or even look for the best area in the arena of where you want to sit. To make it even better, Vivid Seats is giving listeners to this podcast a discount, an exclusive promo code for new customers to receive $20 off any purchase of $200 or more, and you have to use that promo code Locked On. That's all one word, Locked On. $20 off for orders of $200 or more for new users. Go to the App Store, go to Google Play, and download the Vivid Seats app and use that promo code Locked On. Make a memory that lasts a lifetime and let Vivid Seats help get you to your live event of choice. Also, guys, make sure you are getting all of your NBA previews this week at Locked On NBA. We're doing 6 teams a day, 5 days this week, all 30 teams previewed from the local experts on Locked On NBA, with myself and David Locke offering some comments on each team as well. Go and subscribe to Locked On NBA, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or tell your smart speaker to play the podcast Locked On NBA. The next guy I want to talk about is the point guard situation, or the next situation I want to talk about is the point guard situation in LA with Lonzo Ball and Rajon Rondo. Now, Ball, of course, we haven't seen play at all so far this preseason, but he is slated to be in the next preseason game for the Lakers, so we'll see how that works. Rajon Rondo has been starting, and you heard Tim Bontemps on the podcast last week say he'd be stunned if Rondo wasn't the starter on opening night. Now, of course, Luke Walton doesn't always make the greatest decisions. I understand doing that in terms of easing Lonzo back in, but I hope this is not a long-term thing, because Rondo is an inferior player to Lonzo Ball, and you can say whatever you want about Lonzo's shooting, but he is a better player and a better fit with LeBron James versus Rajon Rondo. Now, in the preseason, Rondo's been giving you a lot of assists, 7 per game, but averaging 4 points. So he's not going to give you too much else. I think he's a very low upside guy. And while he's fine to have and draft with the last pick and use him for a week or so, I don't think there's going to be sustained long-term value there. He is going to be an assist valuable guy, which is useful and it can really help, but I just don't think there's much upside there in Rondo. Of course, the concern we have with Lonzo is that when is he going to get back to minutes? Now, he's not going to be playing the minutes he saw last season. We already knew that before all this stuff with Rondo came out. That was a pretty much a guarantee that he wasn't going to be playing 34 or 35 minutes. Where do you look at drafting him? It is a concern, and I think he should be sliding pretty significantly. You wouldn't be looking at him at the top 50. He has top 20 upside, there's no doubt about that, but he was not going to get there this season with LeBron on this team. He's just not going to be able to get to that level, unfortunately. So we're looking at a mid-round guy who is still going to have some percentage issues. I do think that the percentages will improve this season. But it's not going to be, fantastic. It's going to be excellent in that area or anything like that. And as I said with Rondo, I don't really see a huge amount of upside in looking at him for this upcoming season. Not someone that I'm jumping on the bandwagon and needing to draft at all. Trae Young in Atlanta. I think he's done pretty much what we expected him to do, the starting point guard for them in the preseason. He will start the regular season as a starting point guard. I don't think there's much to debate there. Before today's game, in the 2 games prior, 13 points, 6.5 assists with 1.5 steals in 25 minutes. That's really useful. Now, we knew the field goal percentage was going to be shitful. It was at 35%. I think he shot a little bit better in today's game. I'll just bring up that box score because the Hawks have just finished their game at the time of me recording. This day they ran out some interesting lineups. Alex Len played pretty well for them. Amari Spellman started, the Wizard. What did Young do that? 16 points, 2 assists, 1 steal on 39% shooting, 40% from 3, and he got to the line another 5 times. That's 11 free throw attempts in 3 games, and that's another thing that I've talked about with Young, is he will get to the line, and he will hit free throws at a high rate. He will get assists. The field goal percentage is going to be shit, but he is going to be a valuable guy, and with the uncertainty with DeJounte Murray now, I'd even consider looking at Trae Young ahead of him. Obviously, very different point guards. Getting those high assists, high free throw percentage, high volume, high threes is not what DeJounte is going to bring you. But I think we should feel pretty confident with Trae Young at the moment in terms of what his playing time is going to be, what his role is going to be, and he's doing almost exactly what we expected him to do. At this point, is be an inefficient shooter who gets to the line and gets assists and can still generate steals, which is what he's done, and that's a positive in terms of at least returning that value that we hoped that he would be able to bring. Dennis Smith Jr., he's looked much, much better in the preseason. The game in China against the Sixers, I think he had 15 points in the first quarter. It's been well bandied about, and I've said it on this podcast a lot, is that Smith's catch and shoot percentages last season were almost double his numbers from pull-up shooting. And with Doncic around, with DeAndre Jordan also around, it takes a little bit of the self-creation burden off Smith. And we saw that in that game in China, that he was knocking down threes at a pretty high rate. He is averaging 18 points with 5.5 assists on 54% shooting, including 44% from 3 across the 2 preseason games. That makes him a top 30 preseason guy, and I don't think he's going to be that high. But if he can get... Now, I've said all along, I don't have any concerns with him playing alongside Doncic. I think it helps his efficiency. His efficiency won't be this high, and he is still shooting only 57% from the line, which is obviously annoying. But I think he's going to crack the top 100, and if he was a top 50 player by the end of the season, I wouldn't be stunned. Now, I wouldn't be taking him in that area, and I don't think his ADP would suggest that at all. His ADP is 78 on Yahoo, so I don't think we need to be 81 on Fantrax, so that's fine. I've got him ranked just at the moment outside the top 100, mainly because of the poor free throw percentage. But I've got him averaging about 18 points per game, which is what he's doing in preseason. I think he could even push to 20 in a best case scenario, 20.6 assists. And if the efficiency rises more than I expect, then there's pretty significant value in Dennis Smith. He's looked very impressive. I was big on him heading into the draft last season. I was waiting for it to click. And I'm cautiously thinking that maybe it is clicking at the moment, which obviously would be excellent for his value. A guy that played against Smith in that game in China was Markelle Fultz of the Philadelphia 76ers. Again, I spoke about this with Bontemps the other day. It feels like he's just going to be the starter. He's going to get minutes. He's averaging just 10 points in 24 minutes, but doing 1.7 steals. Doing 1.7 steals? That doesn't sound right. 1.7 steals, 1.3 blocks, almost 3 assists, over 3 rebounds. He's only hit 1 3 so far, 43% from the field. I think importantly, 75% from the line when he was at 48 last year. And he was like a 65 to 70 guy in college. So I think we can expect that level to come up. I think he should be a top 100 or close to a top 100 player this season. It's all going to come down to you really can, if the free throws go from 65, or if they're 65, he's probably marginally outside the top 100. If they're 72, then he's inside the top 100. It adds an extra point or two onto his scoring. And if the blocks can keep up at this rate, then he will be a top 100 guy as well. But Fultz is pretty strong there, and I think that this role, these minutes are going to continue. TJ McConnell's out of the rotation. We saw Landry Shamet put up some pretty interesting shooting performance over in China as well. Didn't miss a shot. He looks like he'll be in the rotation with Baby Neck Wilson Chandler and Jared Bayless both hurt. But it's going to be a Simmons, Fultz, Redick 3-man guard rotation with Shamet filling in the gaps there. So I think we should feel pretty confident about Markelle's playing time. And what we're seeing from him now is more representative of what we saw from college, apart from the three-point shooting, which isn't quite back to where it was. And he was a very, very good three-point shooter in college, and hopefully that level can return for Markelle. We're still waiting on that, of course. Let's have a look at the next bunch of point guards I want to talk about. DJ Augustin looks like he does have that starting job in Orlando locked down. I don't know if he's going to keep it for the season. He doesn't make a ton of sense as a long-term guy with their other players, but Jaren Grant is an excellent. He's been okay in the preseason, 10 points and 4.5 assists. He's shooting well. He'll hit threes. That's what he's going to do. He will get you some steals. He averaged 0.7 in 23.5 minutes last year, which is okay. He's a very low upside guy, but he is fine as a late round type point guard who might average 14 points or 15 points and 5 assists and 2 threes and have a really high free throw percentage as well, 87% last year. So it looks like he has that job in Orlando. Grant might take it at some point, but he is fine as a late round, albeit low upside type of player for the Orlando Magic. Now, I do want to talk New York Knicks and their point guards. But I'll talk about them in a sec. So I do have to remind you that Locked On NBA, it never went away. It's still here for you every single day of the week. Locked On NBA is your daily NBA podcast that you need to be listening to. Every Monday, get the local experts on the biggest stories, and then stay with Locked On NBA all week long. Daily 30-minute shows on everything going on in the NBA. Subscribe for it for free. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or tell your smart speaker to play the podcast Locked On NBA. One other thing about subscribing to podcasts, go grab your partner's phone, grab your parents' phone, go subscribe to my show, and do it everywhere. Hey, download a show, delete it, re-download it. That's great. Just boost these numbers up. Let's get the show real. I believe now, I think Sean Woodley on Locked On Raptors told me this is on the iTunes chart in Canada that Locked On Fantasy Basketball was the 13th. On number 13 on the top sports podcast, which is awesome. I'd love to crack the top 10. And if you are in a country other than Australia, I can't see the iTunes chart. So if you could tell me if you can see Locked On Fantasy Basketball in any of your country's iTunes charts in the sports category, please let me know. I'm always interested to hear where it is going. I think the peak I had it here, I think I got to 11th on the charts in Australia, and I'd love to know where it is in your country. So please tweet that at me at @redrock_bball. Let's talk Knicks point guards. David Fizdale had a quote today that and I don't know what now, I said this last year when Fizdale got fired by Memphis. I don't think Fizdale is a very good coach. I got shit on everywhere from that. Oh man, you're talking about, you're wrong for this. But I still maintain I don't think he's very good. He's okay, he's solid, but I don't think he's very good, and I think he's a little bit overrated. I think we're going to see how that pans out this season. Yes, he's team shit, but that doesn't mean that you need to make bad decisions. And continually having Emmanuel Mudiay in the rotation is a bad decision. He started him in the third preseason game. He looked terrible. And then we had another quote from Fizdale saying that he's still going to be using these 3 point guards, Frank Ntilikina, Trey Burke, and Emmanuel Mudiay. There is zero reason for Mudiay to be playing at any point. I think he should be cut, really, from this team. There's no need for him to be around. And I don't understand having him in the rotation. They're talking about playing Ntilikina at shooting guard and small forward. Just play him at point guard. And I know he can defend these other positions. That's great. Trey Burke should be the starter, but there's so much uncertainty as to what they're going to do with this starting position. Burke has not been the same guy that he was at the end of last season, and that's completely understandable because, as I've said a million times, the way Trey Burke was shooting last season from 2-point range was completely unsustainable. He was hitting them, I think, at 50%, which is a nonsense number for long twos. I probably should look that up before spouting that off as fact, but I know that what he was doing in terms of shooting those long twos was going to be impossible to continue. And that's something when you always want to look at players and look at regression, is what numbers did they put up that don't make any sense to move forward. On long twos from between 16 feet and the 3-point line, he shot 57%. That is a lot. That is like a massive amount. And 29% of his shots came from that area. That is a ludicrous percentage. Career, he is at 44% from that range. He went at 57 last season. So if that comes back to career numbers and the previous four, or all his other seasons, 42, 40, 44, 43, if that comes back down, then his scoring drops, his efficiency drops, and he's nowhere near the player he was last season. Now, he's still fine as a pick, and he's the guy that you pick over Ntilikina, and you pick him over Emmanuel Mudiay, obviously. But I think what we saw from him at the end of last season was a little bit anomalous. It's not something that we should be relying upon. And Fizdale saying, in terms of his point guards, that none of them are going to get over 28 minutes a night because that means if they are getting over that many minutes a night, they're not playing hard enough. So I don't know how all this is going to work out. So Burke's upside might be capped there. I think the efficiency is going to dip somewhat. I think he can have a rise in his 3-point percentage, which was a little bit down last season. But I do worry about what he's going to show for this upcoming season, and I think he might be a bit of a letdown. But if you're taking him in the 120s, it's fine. Just don't expect what Trey Burke did last season to be something that necessarily continues because of course, there are reasons to expect a level of regression from Burke, and I think they're fairly clearly obvious, or fairly obvious anyway to most people that is the case. Now let's talk about the Boston Celtics. I want to talk about Terry Rozier. Everyone loves Terry Rozier. We know that. He's got a great personality. He put up some pretty decent numbers at times last season, but we have to remember that he is behind Kyrie Irving as the backup point guard. They will run Marcus Smart as a backup point guard. It's going to be hard, I believe, for Rozier to have much value. He's the 126th ranked guy, or ADP on Yahoo, 135 on Fantrax. I don't really see the point of it. The upside is there if Kyrie gets hurt, and maybe you can bank on that. But what if Kyrie misses 12 games, 10 games? Is that really worth it to draft Rozier in that case? I'm not big on drafting handcuffs in standard leagues because in these situations, you need to be using these guys. Now, in a Roto league, in a weekly changes league, you can use your bench for stash guys, and it makes more sense there. If Kyrie goes down, maybe you can get Rozier. But even last season, in the last 2 months of the year, where he played 31 minutes a night, he was the 98th ranked player. It wasn't like he was coming in as a top 50 guy, a top 40 guy. He averaged 14.5 points with 5 rebounds and 4 assists, under a steal, 2.5 threes, bad percentages from the field and from the line. So again, he comes out, he puts up numbers, he talks shit, and it's great, and people endear themselves. He endears himself to people. But when you break down the actual numbers, he wasn't that good. He wasn't that fantastic from our point of view, from a fantasy point of view. He wasn't putting up these excellent type numbers that made you go, well, in every situation, I've got to make sure I've got Terry Rozier just in case, because I've got a guaranteed top 50 guy, because that wasn't the case last season. There is still Marcus Smart out there who is going to be able to put up some numbers and have some opportunity at point guard. And for as much as you can criticize his shooting, rightfully so, he does struggle with he struggles with the shooting, but he is good at running an offense and being a point guard and generating assists. he is good at doing all those things. So there is an element of caution, I guess, with Rozier as to how it's going to sit. So don't get sucked in of grabbing him early at all on the hope that Kyrie goes down, because again, maybe he is better than last season, but there's still a lot of holes in his game from a fantasy point of view, at least. The young bull, Colin Sexton in Cleveland, everyone, again, he's one of those guys that he endears himself to people because of the way he plays, because of his aggression, because he talks shit, because he stares down people, all that sort of stuff. And he's going to be the future, and the narrative of, oh, he's going to get all this usage, and George Hill's no good, and George Hill's struggling. I understand that, and George Hill probably is past it at this point. But Sexton's been okay. But again, the problem we have is through the first 2 preseason games, he's averaging 1 assist. 1 in 21 minutes. And he's shooting well. But do we expect him to be a 53% field goal guy? Of course not. There's no way we expect him to be that level of player. He's generated no steals. He's averaging 14 points, and he's outside the top 110 so far in preseason. Again, it is only preseason, but these are the things that I talk about. When I look at what his college statistical profile was, it was an inefficient guy who doesn't get steals, threes, or assists and can score but do it inefficiently. And that's sort of what we've seen so far. And there can be improvement there, and he's fine to take a flyer on with a late pick. But I don't think we should be putting all our eggs into a Colin Sexton basket and expecting just because he's going to be #given the keys that he's going to come out and put up these big numbers, because it's not just about scoring at high volume. If you're in a points league that has 1 point per stat, which again is the shittest form of league that you can possibly have, then that's fine, because he'll go out there and he'll score, and everything else that he doesn't do won't actually factor into it. But if you're in a categories league, like, he's going to struggle. The field goal percentage, the free throw percentage, the steals, the assists, these aren't good things for him. And that field goal percentage that he's shooting so far through the preseason, it's not something that I think is going to be able to stick. So it is something we do need to pay some attention to with Sexton. Even if he does get given that starting role, what's his upside? Maybe it's top 80? Maybe. And even then, I'd be doubtful. I'd be looking at him as a worse version of Dennis Smith from last year. And everyone absolutely hated Dennis Smith from a fantasy point of view last season. Oh, he kills me in all these areas. And he wasn't that great last season. I was a little bit higher on him than most people, but I feel like the narrative versus what Smith was last season versus what the expectation is for Sexton this season is wildly different. Yet I think that Smith will be a better player, or will have a better rookie year than what Sexton did. And Smith was the 148th ranked guy last year, averaging 15, 4, and 5 with a steal, and shot 40 and 69%.
Giggity.
Now maybe Sexton shoots a better free throw percentage, but overall, like, I think that's a decently okay expectation for Sexton, and it's not a great fantasy option. So the upside is fine, but let's just calm ourselves down a little bit when talking about Big Sexo. Let's talk about the Suns point guards. I am more and more convinced that Devin Booker is going to be the starting point guard for this team when he gets back, which is going to be really early in the season. Shaq Harrison started the first couple. We had Elie Okobo start. I think we can clearly say, though, that DeAnthony Melton is way down, and he is not going to be a starter. He will not be a regular rotation guy, and I don't think he should be someone that you're looking at as a standard league guy. Okobo was okay. Harrison does the defensive stuff, and I think that works pretty well next to Devin Booker. I think Booker will start at point guard, and Josh Jackson will start at shooting guard. Harrison in the 2 games is averaging 10 points, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2.5 blocks. The shooting is a concern for him there. We also had Isaiah Cannon play 32 minutes in 1 game and had 11 points and 3 assists. I just don't think any of these guys are really worth drafting. Cannon, Harrison, Melton, or Okobo are going to be worth drafting in standard leagues at this point. The shout out to Okobo shooting 23% from the field, which amazingly is better than Ryan Anderson and Dragan Bender. So some pretty piss poor shooting. Oh, and McCall Bridges, who is out for the next week with an elbow injury, who's shooting 13% from the field. So it hasn't been great showing from Harrison, from Okobo, from Melton, from any of these guys. And I still can look at Harrison and go, well, if he gets 2 steals a game in 25 minutes, that's useful. But I just think it's going to be a shit show, and I don't think actually any of these guys are going to end up starting for the Suns for this coming season. Who are we going to go on to next? Let's bring up my next list of things to talk about. Let's talk Dennis Schroeder. The news came out that Andre Robertson is out for until at least December. He had a setback. I don't think we're seeing him until January now. Now, while Russell Westbrook's out, Dennis Schroeder's going to come in and he's going to put up strong numbers. Like in fact, today's game against the Hawks, in 27 minutes, he had 20.7 rebounds, 6 assists, and a block. Yes, 64% shooting's unrealistic, but he is a guy that has to be owned. His value is going to disappear, but with the setback from Robertson, I don't know how long it's going to take him to get back to full health. Reminder, he played only 26 minutes per game last season before he got injured. So I think his minutes could struggle there. I think you're going to see a lot of Westbrook and Schroeder closing lineups or playing together. So I think drafting Dennis Schroeder with a last pick is something that you can pay attention to that, and you can have a look at it, and you can feel pretty, not necessarily pretty strongly about it, but I think you can look at him and go, well, he's a must-own while Westbrook is out, and he should be drafted, and then we'll see how long that lasts. Does it last through till Christmas? I think that's a possibility that Schroeder's value lasts that long, with Ingram, with Westbrook or with Robertson out, because Alex Abrines, Terry Ferguson, Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot, they haven't been playing that well to take all of these shooting guard minutes away. So Schroeder still has that ability to produce. Maybe his percentages, like Dennis Smith Jr., can jump up playing a little bit more off the ball, and he can go back to that role that he had more in Atlanta, where he'd play alongside Jeff Teague.
My name is Jeff.
Shout out to the guy who told me that the My Name is Jeff drop is the worst drop that I play. Can't please everyone. Schroeder is an interesting guy in that regard, and I think he's going to have some longer than we expected term value, and he's played pretty well throughout the preseason as well. Like prior to today's game, I'm just going to bring up what his averages were, which they were fairly strong from memory. Where are we? In 27 minutes, 16.5 points with 7.5 assists, a steal, and shot pretty shit as well, 31%, and that still had him good for a top 70 guy. And I think we're looking at him as being at least a top 100, maybe top 90 guy while Robertson's out, and probably top 50 while Westbrook's out. Not that Westbrook is guaranteed to miss any regular season time. I would think that he would, though. Michael Carter-Williams of the Houston Rockets looks good. Maybe he just needed a good coach and better teammates to provide some value. Now, Brandon Knight is out with this knee injury. We don't know how long that's going to keep him out for, but with Carter Williams' ability to defend, I could very easily see him being in the rotation over Brandon Knight. Now, we have to remember that last season it was Chris Paul, it was Jim Harden, it was Eric Gordon, and no other guard got run. Yes, they lost Trevor Ariza, replaced by Carmelo Anthony. They lost Luke Mamute, replaced by James Ennis. So it's going to be hard to find Carter Williams coming in and getting big chunks of minutes, but he's been impressive. 17 points per game with 4 rebounds and 3.5 assists in the 2 preseason games. Yes, 67% shooting is not going to continue to happen. Still hasn't hit a 3. But I think he'll probably be ahead of Brandon Knight in the rotation for his defensive ability. I just don't see where the big minutes are coming for Carter Williams. And people can say he's going to be the backup to Chris Paul. That's fine. But last year, Jim Harden was the backup to Chris Paul, and Eric Gordon got those minutes. And you can push Gordon up to the 3, but that means you're going to lose minutes for Melo, and you're going to lose minutes for James Ennis. And we have to remember that Mamute and Ariza combined for about 55 minutes per game. And I can see that being the combination that Melo and Ennis end up playing this season. Maybe they play 27, 28 each, or 29 and 26, however it is. That same minute. So you got to try and squeeze Carter Williams, or if it's Brandon Knight, into a role that didn't exist last season. So where is that role going to come? They're ostensibly replacing Bobby Brown or Aaron Jackson, guys who were that 4th guard on this team who barely saw the court at all. So there's not a huge role there, but Carter Williams has looked much better in this Rocket system, better than I anticipated him to look, and I guess that's encouraging and something to pay attention to. Reggie Jackson in Detroit, we haven't seen him yet, but he has been cleared to play along with Blakey Griffin in the next game. I still worry, this ankle problem still going on for him after however long it's been. Like, it's been a very long time since whenever he heard it back in December. Maybe he did come back at the end of last season, but is still struggling with that issue. I do think he plays some more minutes this season under Dwayne Casey versus Stan Van Gundy, but his upside's limited by low steals, not a high 3-point guy, not a massively high assist guy, some poor field goal percentage. Still worth looking at towards the end of a draft, but a lowish upside guy who is still battling this injury, which is not good news. But on the positive side of things from an injury point of view is Mike Conley, who has looked good. I've been talking about Mike Conley a lot this offseason and preseason. I've got him in almost every draft that I'm in. If I have a look at the ones that I've done this season, 1, 2, 3, I think I've got even 3 of the 5 redraft leagues that I've done so far this season. He has played only 24 minutes a game so far, 13.5 points, shooting 48%. The three-pointers aren't there yet, the assists aren't there, but he looks solid out there, which is all we can expect from Conley. And I think the minutes are going to push up for him as we move into the regular season. I think he's going to be strong as a top 50 guy who you can probably get at 50, 55, 60 in some situations, unless you're drafting at me where I'm going to draft him about pick 40. But he has been he's been pretty impressive so far, and just it's more of a positive to see him on the court and playing really without any restriction, and that's the big news there. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has looked super impressive in the preseason so far. 11 points with 3 assists, 2 steals per game, shooting the ball well, gets where he wants. He's going to have some issues, but I can see him moving ahead of Avery Bradley at some point this season. There's Lou Williams, who gets the most minutes for the guards, and there's Patrick Beverley. And then we've got Bradley and Gilgeous-Alexander. Trades could definitely be happening with this team, and I look at him as maybe someone that you're not necessarily drafting at this point, but he looks like he's going to fit. I had him as my 8th prospect in Dynasty rankings. I stick at least with that. Maybe I'll move that higher to 7. Ahead of Marvin Bagley, but he's been impressive in what he's done. I think he's got the ability to be a really well-rounded guard who can rebound, assist, steal, block, and score, and do it fairly efficiently, which is something to pay attention to. Shot the ball well in college from 3 on limited attempts, but let's hope that can continue. The stroke does look a lot better from Gilgeous-Alexander. I'm not sure he's really worth drafting with a last pick at this point, but he could be. You never know when a trade's going to go down. And as soon as an opening happens in that guard rotation, whether it's injury or whether it is a trade, you go and grab Shai and you run from there because they love him. He's been impressive. The players love him. The coaching staff loves him. Doc is anti-rookies, but again, he's never really had a rookie as good as Gilgeous-Alexander. We can't really compare Reggie Bullock, CJ Wilcox, and Bryce Johnson to what Shai's been able to do or what Shai can do from a talent perspective, and he's looked really good. He's in the rotation. I don't think Milosh is going to be replacing him at any point, even when he comes back from his hamstring injury. I think Shai is in there, so deep leaguers, you'll want to pay attention there, and let's see what happens after that. But someone who's been impressive against NBA competition in the preseason so far. Let's take it now to I want to do some playoff preview stuff for this coming season. That's all the news on the point guards at this point. So these are my teams that I'm looking at who I think will make the playoffs and my projected seedings for them heading into the Western Conference playoffs. So at the 1 seed, I've got the Golden State Warriors, the Rockets at the 2 seed, the Jazz at the 3 seed, and the Nuggets at the 4 seed. Now, like last season, I can see 3 through 7 being pretty close. Last year was like 3 through 8, but I can see 3 through 7, a little bit of a gap there. So we're going Warriors, Rockets, Jazz, and Nuggets as the first 4. That's a big leap for the Nuggets, moving up from the 9th seed to the 4th seed, but that might only be 2 or 3 games improvement, which I can see them doing. I've got the Pelicans in the 5th seed, the Lakers in the 6th seed, the Thunder in the 7th seed, and the Blazers in the 8th seed. I've mainly got the Thunder there because I just worry about Westbrook's knee. Robinson's a big deal to lose him for this long as well, and that could really impact them. And if Westbrook gets hurt again, that's a real concern. So that's why I've got them down that low. I could very easily see them be 5th or 4th if Robinson and Westbrook were guaranteed healthy, but of course they're not. So therefore, I'm not looking at them as being that high up. So I've got them in the 7th seed. So I've got Minnesota out and San Antonio out of the playoffs from last season. I'm not that big on the Timberwolves. Clearly, I think they're going to be a disaster this season. The Jimmy Butler situation is still not resolved. And the Spurs, I could see them making it in over the Blazers, but I chose to leave them out. Let's just mix shit up a little bit. They're in the Western Conference. In the Eastern Conference, at the 1 seed, I've got the Raptors, followed by the Celtics, then the Sixers. I've got the Bucks in at the 4th seed, the Heat at the 5th seed, the Pacers at 6, the Wizards at 7, and the Pistons at 8. I've got the Hornets just on the outside looking in. So basically, we've got the Pistons replacing the Cavs from last year's playoffs, the Bucks taking a jump up with a better coach in Mike Budenholzer there. The Heat, I think I baked in the Jimmy Butler trade. I think that it's going to happen, but of course the Timberwolves are being dicks about it, so we don't know at that point. And if Butler doesn't come to Miami, I think the Pacers will probably push into that 5 seed there. The Raptors with the fun guy.
I'm a fun guy.
Yeah, I think they are the number one seed. The Celtics are obviously awesome as well. And the Sixers, if Fultz actually can be the real deal, that's going to be a very, very tight race for the top three. I think that's the way it pans out, but I could understand any combination of those three teams filling those spots. And I feel pretty confident about the Bucks moving into the fourth seed there. So that's how I see the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. Let's have a look at how I look at the NBA Finals. I think it will be the 2-1 seeds, really uncontroversial. The Raptors versus the Warriors, and I think the Warriors will end up winning the NBA Finals there as well. And then I go my projections for the worst 5 teams in the NBA. The Sacramento Kings, the Phoenix Suns, the Atlanta Hawks, the New York Knicks, and the Chicago Bulls. That is my predictions for the worst 5 teams in the NBA. I think the Suns could be better than the Hawks, but playing against more Western Conference teams probably makes their record worse in the end. And then you've got the 3 East teams, the Hawks, the Knicks, and the Bulls, and the Kings. That's legit disaster potential. That's under 20 win potential, I think, for the Kings for this season. So we'll see how this all pans out. I'm sure I'm going to be horribly wrong about most of this, but that's how I see my playoff projections looking for this coming 2018-19 season, guys. Make sure you are checking out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network, whether that's Locked On NBA, your team-specific shows, Locked On MLB, or Locked On Baseball stuff, Locked On NFL show with Matt Williamson, plus all of our college shows. There's so much happening across the network. And check out our sponsor, Vivid Seats, and use that promo code Locked On to save $20 off orders of $200 or more. Follow me on Twitter at @redrock_Beeble and subscribe to this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. Grab your friend's phone, grab your family's phone, subscribe to it there, leave a 5-star review. It is an awesome way of helping out this show. And guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Enes Kanter.